Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's discussion. We are pleased to welcome Tiffany D. Joining Tiffany in conversation tonight is Elie Mystal. Tiffany D. is the author of the new book, Say It Louder, Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy. You can keep up with all of our virtual author events on our website at powells.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Tonight is a conversation between Tiffany and Elie, followed by a Q&A. If you have a question for either speaker, please click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. All questions should be submitted in the Q&A button. You can support Tiffany and Powell's books by purchasing a copy of Say It Louder at powells.com. I'll share that link in the chat function. This evening's event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel next week. Tonight we're here to celebrate Tiffany D. and her book, Say It Louder. Say It Louder is Cross's examination of how America's composition was designed to exclude Black voters and how it would likely cease to exist without them. Say It Louder is a reflective look at the efforts endlessly attempting to deny people of color the right to vote and countless efforts to mute their voices. As the demographics of the country are changing, so too is the electoral power construct, by evolution and by force. Grounded in the most up-to-date research, Say It Louder is a vital tool for a wide swath of constituencies. Tiffany D. is a resident fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Institute of Politics. As an on-air political analyst, she is a longtime cable news veteran. Cross is a former associate producer for CNN, DC bureau chief for BET Networks, and liaison to the Obama administration. She co-founded the daily newsletter, The Beat DC. She attended Clark Atlanta University and lives in Washington, DC. Joining Tiffany today is Elie Mystal. Elie is the justice correspondent for The Nation. He's a graduate of Harvard Law School and Harvard College. Tiffany and Elie, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Okay, I guess I'll take it away. Obviously, we're coming to you right now in the midst of some breaking news. We just found out, if you don't know, I hate to be the one to tell you, but we just found out that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away. She was 87, and she is gone. So we just found that out an hour ago or so, and obviously this is kind of devastating news. Our prayers and thoughts and hearts go out to her family, who can't imagine how they're feeling tonight. So our thoughts and prayers are with them. And I don't think that I'm speaking out of school to say that our thoughts and prayers are with our country. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a stalwart defender of women's rights and women's equality and liberty. With her passing, that opens up a critical spot on the Supreme Court to be replaced by Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. And that's not good if you like things like rights. So with that as a very sad and unfortunate setup, and I'll admit I am off my game having just heard this news. With that as a setup, Tiffany, your book talks a lot about media representation and the lack thereof for Black and brown voices, and the lack of media representation in many cases for women voices, and especially women of color. Given the news cycle that we're about to get into, with the passing of RBG, who has been such a defender of women's rights, how do you think the media needs to treat this moment and treat what she represented to so many?
Well, first, let me say, Elie, thank you for being in conversation with me tonight. And given this devastating news, I can't imagine a better person to be with me. Right before we went live, I was texting Elie saying, I can't do this for an hour after hearing the news. And Elie said, we have to talk about this. Let's talk about it. And so I have just as many questions for you tonight, Elie, and your brilliant legal mind as we navigate this. To your question about how the media should treat this, I hope they treat it seriously, because in 2016, I think we saw a lot of failings, which I detail in the book. The book is not just about framing how the country has consistently tried to keep Black people out of democracy, but the role that the media plays in helping in that effort, and has always played in devastating and depressing Black turnout, and really spinning on an axis that the assumption that the world spins on the axis of white folks, you know? And so given what could potentially land in the courts, I think it would be incumbent upon the media landscape to talk about what this means for the rising majority of the country, really for everybody, but certainly for the rising majority of the country. It's not all about Roe v. Wade. You know, there are very consequential decisions that the court is going to face. The chief among them, I can anticipate, would be the election. We don't know how this election is going to go. We're already seeing multiple issues across the country take up space in the courts already. It is very likely that we can see a scenario where we won't know who the president is on November 3rd, and the issue could potentially escalate to SCOTUS. And then we are in a really, we are FUBAR, as they say. And I am just very concerned about it, Elie, very, very concerned. And for the past few years, there have been multiple incidents where we could have hit a panic button, where we should have hit the panic button. And now I feel like if nothing else, it's time to panic, because if this man gets reelected, who's to stop him from appointing Jared Kushner, acting Secretary of Defense? With no consequence. We've seen what he does when there is consequence. With no consequence, and with controlling potentially the Senate and the courts, I think we will see our core democratic principles erode at an even faster pace. And tonight I am heartbroken, but more than anything, I will tell you, Elie, I am terrified. I am legitimately terrified.
As well you should be, unfortunately. I don't have a lot of soothing words in terms of what happens next. You know, one of the reasons.
I ask you, Elie, if you don't mind, because I can use some kind of guidance here. What can be done? Because, you know, first of all, McConnell has no consistency here. You know, despite him being an obstructionist during the Obama administration, I think he is going to try to cram a nominee in. You have outlets like the Federalist Society with, you know, hand-picked nominees ready to go. What legal scenario do you see happening in terms of Donald Trump nominating someone and the Senate confirming this person?
I mean, let's remember when McConnell blocked Merrick Garland, Trump's nominee, Obama's nominee, in 2016. He said it was because, and it was an election year, and the people should get to decide who they want to pick the next Supreme Court justice. Antonin Scalia died in February of 2016. We are in September of 2020. If Mitch McConnell had any shred of decency or consistency, he would apply the same rule that he himself invented in 2016. He would apply it now and wait for a new presidential election before a nominee is installed. He will not do that because he is a dripping hypocrite. He has already made promises that he would push through a nominee if he gets the opportunity, and now it looks like he does. The other thing that's the only key difference between 2016 and 2020 is that Mitch McConnell was in the majority then, and he's in the majority now, and that is why Charles Schumer, Democratic Minority Leader, does not have the power to block just because a nominee, a McConnell and Trump nominee. Now, Democrats do have 57 votes, 47 votes. And to block one, you'd need 51, right? So are there 4 Republicans who would object to McConnell hastily pushing through a Supreme Court nominee? Remember, it takes a lot, traditionally, it takes quite a bit of time for a nominee to be picked and vetted, and then there's supposed to be hearings. All of that would have to be massively accelerated or completely ignored for McConnell to push through a nominee before the election. Are there 4 Republicans who say no to that? Mitt Romney?
Yeah.
Lisa Murkowski? I can maybe count 2. I can't count.
Susan Collins. Susan Collins has a tough election. I mean, this might be, some of you have thoughts and concerns at any point in time. This might be the time to exercise, to have some sort of redeeming quality as she faces a tough competitor.
If you found 4 Republicans to go along with it, maybe you could, but even in that situation, and this is where I need kind of liberals especially to get their heads around, even in that situation, even if you could pressure McConnell to delay it until the election, that only buys you to November 3rd. I think that McConnell would push through, even if Trump loses, would push through a nominee in the lame duck. Because even as we're saying, Susan Collins, and if Susan Collins loses, what does she have to lose?
Yeah.
You know, in December if she votes for a Trump nominee. So I think it is likely that whether they do it right before the election or right after, it is almost a certainty that McConnell will put another justice on the Supreme Court, and it will now be 6-3 in favor of conservative justices. Again, to kind of talk about how the media reports this out. You know, one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I felt that people like me were not being, their voices and their concerns were not being represented on the beats that I cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up wanting to be a Supreme Court watcher. You know, I wanted to go to Mars. But you know, as I went through law school and got into the industry, what I noticed is that the Supreme Court bar, while many of them are well-meaning and very smart people, they're incredibly white. They're generally male, but overwhelmingly white. And I believe that whiteness really reflected in their coverage. There is a reason why you didn't see a lot of outrage from the press when John Roberts gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013. Why? Because the white people covering it, their rights weren't gutted.
Right.
Mine were. Right. And it is that gutting, by the way, of the Voting Rights Act in the Supreme Court that, from where I said, directly led to Trump, because that's what led to the voter suppression that helped him so critically in 2016 and might well help him so critically again in 2020. So one of the reasons why I cover what I cover was to get into that space where there wasn't enough melanin, if you will. In your book, you talk about the need for Black people to be in the space, on the screen, in the print, to cover stories, not that white people are missing, but that mainstream press is not covering with the full breadth of issues and viewpoints. Can you
without nuance, without nuance, without perspective? Even, you know, just simply because there are newsrooms grappling with this now, and there are courtrooms grappling with this now, as we've seen. But even simply saying something like Black Lives Matter. Imagine declaring that your own life matters is being perceived as making a political statement. Yet you can say, give me liberty or give me death, and it's celebrated and cloaked in this American patriotism. But anytime that we talk about ourselves as an equal part of the American body politic, it comes with a level of controversy that really should not exist. To your point about people who cover the courts and not, you know, not having the outrage, I write about in the book when early on in Trump's presidency, when he tweeted out that he may have taped conversations with he and James Comey. And this is where we got the, ooh, Lordy, let there be tapes. And the Beltway press corps went nuts over this. It was breaking news all across the cable outlets, all the notifications on my phone, or Donald Trump may have secretly recorded conversations with former FBI Director James Comey. That same day, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions sent out a memo to the prosecutors across the country saying, I want you to go after these drug charges, low-level offenses, pursue the maximum sentences. Just like that, mandatory minimums are brought back. And where was the outrage? Where was the press saying, whoa, huge, big story happening? But because that's something that overwhelmingly and disproportionately impacts Black and brown people of this country, there wasn't any breaking news that day. You only heard some dumbass story about Donald Trump saying that he may have taped phone calls with James Comey. And you see that happening again and again and again. Quite frequently, the people who decorate cable news sets are Beltway operatives. They're members of this chattering class that don't always connect with regular everyday people. This is the reason why I always, I talk about my personal story in the book, because I want people to know I am you. When I'm on a set, you're on the set. I did not grow up privileged. I am in this world of the Beltway chattering class. I'm not of it. I'm not welcome in it. Nobody said, hey, yeah, we'd love to have your perspective. Please come to our cocktail party at the embassy and sit around with the powers that be and let us celebrate you for, anything about yourself while we watch the mediocrity of this space rise and get television shows and get Emmys and, take up space every morning, spouting ridiculousness sometimes. And so, this is a scenario right now where we have the opportunity to talk about the seriousness of this moment that we're in. Because in 2016, for the people who did not see this for what it was, I will be petty for the rest of my life and say, we tried to tell you. We tried to tell you time and again, because we are so familiar with what white supremacy looks like. We really ought to be your first points of contact. So this question of, you remember Elie when Trump first got elected, or when he was even on the campaign trail, and it was always the controversial question, is Donald Trump racist? Well, what a dumbass question, it's ridiculous, it's like asking somebody, is the sky blue? I mean, it's just a ridiculous assessment. It should be. What does it say about the country that so many people are supporting someone who espouses these racist thoughts and plans to introduce or perpetuate racist policies? But that was never the conversation. And even now, it feels like we have a long way to go to get to that conversation, to have a more honest and robust conversation about the ugly truth about America that so many people are eager to reject and mute and deny. But the living descendants of it will always speak our truth.
It just never escaped my notice after John Lewis's passing that all of these kind of white media pundits kind of spoke eloquently about how important John Lewis was and what John Lewis meant to them. And not one of them covered John Lewis's last protest, which was a sit-in in Congress to stop who? Jeff Sessions, who was so much of a racist and a Klan sympathizer that he couldn't get a judgeship back in the day. When Trump appointed him as Attorney General, John Lewis saw it. And John Lewis knew that we needed to stop it. And John Lewis had a sit-in that he could not get covered by the mainstream press. So but they all love John Lewis.
Right.
But this kind of goes to my next question. And you teed it up. And I don't want to get you in trouble, but you said it, so I'm going to go with it. You are in the pundit class, but you are not welcome in the pundit class. I am similar. I don't know if I'm banned this week or not. Who knows? It comes and goes. Why do you think that is? As much as you can say without getting in trouble, why do you think that is that a person like you is not, is not embraced by that class? You're interesting on TV. You have interesting things to say. You're without sounding creepy. You're pretty on camera. You make the clicks go boom. You make the ratings happen. Why do you think you're not as embraced as some other people?
That's interesting. One thing I will say, Elie, and I think that I hope you and I share this space, because there have been times that I would imagine both of us have felt very unwelcome in this space. And one thing I can say about this process is people's executives, for example, who make decisions, editorial decision-making power, executives who might not get me, or hosts, or some members of the viewing audience who may not appreciate the truth that I speak. I have had to get very comfortable making people uncomfortable, because I've been uncomfortable for a long goddamn time, you know? And I feel like, let you be uncomfortable for this morning segment and let you hear an uncomfortable truth about a party you once championed. Let's point out the role that you played in getting us here. Everybody wants to cover the protest, like you said, and talk lovingly about John Lewis, and you know, people want to talk about how, you know, racist Trump is and how awful he is. But let's revisit the role that you yourself perhaps played in creating a pathway for this man to get to the White House. Because if we're not having that truthful of a conversation, then there's really no need for me to be a part of it. And so if that makes people uncomfortable, I've just had to learn to accept it has nothing to do with me. These people don't validate me. They don't decide if my truth is worth speaking or not. They don't advance my voice. They don't mute my voice. And so when you know who you are, and there is just the rearing that life has given me, to be, you know, slapped in the face, had doors slammed in my face, literally had a keyboard thrown at my head one time by a CNN personality.
It seems like it would be illegal now.
Oh, I wish I knew what I knew then, because it would not be called CNN. It would be called TNN, because that would be the network, I'll tell you. But at the time, I didn't know any. You know, I was a young, cockeyed enthusiast. I'm a young journalist trying to, you know, make it. And I didn't have any sense of self. I thought the network was doing me a favor to let me work there. And so I didn't handle a lot of situations the best way. But we all learned and, you know, stand up to do a better job the next day. But yeah, I would say that I have stopped looking to be welcomed by the chattering class. Elie, you and I are a part of a collective of new voices in this space, and we make each other feel welcome. We have our little group chats where we're talking all day. We celebrate each other. Every time you put out an amazing piece in The Nation, we're all reading it and sharing it and talking about our favorite paragraphs. You and I have talked about my book. We have other friends who have written books. So it feels like our own little Black Algonquin roundtable that we get to share and celebrate, and where we are not the other, where we are actually the rising majority of the country. And I think eventually, instead of us conforming ourselves and twisting ourselves into people who certain, you know, white executives might find more palatable, I think they're going to have to catch up, quite honestly, because the average cable news viewer is between 60 and 65-year-old white men. You got to know those folks ain't immortal. You got to know it's a whole new crop of people out here who are looking for outlets where we can consume news and information and feel seen and heard and have our lived American experience acknowledged. And as long as that doesn't happen, when there's just an extension of that, and you know, it's hard to explain to people, Elie, quite honestly, the difference between a Black face and a Black voice. Because there are certainly Black faces who, you know, may be very accepted and celebrated in the chattering class. You know, they've achieved all the standards of success that certain white cable news executives may validate and value. And so because you know, work for a mainstream outlet, a major daily paper, or have won some awards, it's hard to explain how that person might be in the community or of the community, but not in it. How that person's voice is there because they make white America comfortable, and my voice may not be there because you're concerned that I may make white America uncomfortable. I would always rather have the love of my people than I would of those who sit in the corner office, because I might make the people they play golf with uncomfortable. I'm sorry that people feel that way. I'm sorry that it has certainly denied me opportunity. I'm sorry that it has informed my financial outlook. I'm sorry that that cast a dark shadow over many areas of my life. I take care of a mother financially. I, you know, have family members who always need something from me. And so it can definitely be frustrating when you watch white mediocrity continue to elevate and bypass you and be celebrated, and, you know, they get paid for lies, and I'm out here speaking all this truth for free. It can definitely eat at the spirit, but it certainly does not define who I am, and it does not discourage me. I just find other audiences to speak to, and other outlets and platforms where we can have this kind of honest conversation.
I mean, I've said for a long time, Tiffany, that I get to write as an openly Black man, and that's entirely different than writing while Black, right?
And you do so beautifully, Elie. You really do.
And but as you say, like there are places that wouldn't let me do that. I've gotten job offers, you know, for much more money than I make, and who wanted my skills but not myself, right? Like they like the Elie Harvard Law degree part, but they didn't like so much a Black guy who's been stopped by the cops part.
Exactly.
And when I was like, no, well, I'm obviously not going to talk about law without also talking about being stopped and frisked. Like that's the part that they didn't want, and so they found somebody who, you know, there's always somebody willing to do it, and pay them enough money, they'll do it. And so, you know, you have to kind of eat that and build that into your tax bracket. But but as you say, they're speaking the truth has its own reward. But actually, that does get me to my kind of follow-up question here, because one of the things that I hear a lot from not just, you know, our people, but certainly kind of people who have seen us on some of on networks that we go, they say, I love you on CNN, or I love you on MSNBC, or I love you on NPR, but why don't you ever go on Fox? Why don't you ever go, you know, you're always preaching to the choir. Why don't you ever go, you know, talk to the enemy and see if you can change some minds there? You have a great story in your book about, you know, the last time you went on Fox. I also have you know, we are similar in that, you know, first time I was ever on TV was on Fox. You in your book said first time you were ever on TV was through Fox. So can you kind of tell the audience a little bit about that trajectory of Fox will give you a start, but there's a seal.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because Fox is so desperate to have disagreements and to have people from the leftist, you know, liberal side of the divide, which just means anybody who's not a Trump sycophant these days. And before you go on networks like CNN and MSNBC, they always say, well, have you done TV before? Like, do you have any clips? There's a higher standard to appear on those networks. So a lot of times for folks who are, you know, trying to support or grow, at the time I had a news platform that I wanted people to consume. And so I used to do Fox News semi-regularly. And it was always some trickery every single time. And so the time I reference in the book is I was supposed to be on there to discuss midterms. And I'm seated, I'm mic'd, I'm ready to talk about midterms. And I was on with Harris Faulkner, and she starts reading the intro that's all about North Korea. And I thought, maybe they're going to toss to a package, or I don't know why we're talking about North Korea, but, you know, eventually we'll talk about the thing that they told me I'm going to talk about. Well, we were there to talk about North Korea, and somehow the conservative guests got that memo, but I didn't. But it's okay, because watch me work. I think one thing that we all know as Black people, we have to be prepared for everything. There is no, oh, I didn't know we were going to talk about this. I mean, you know, your colleagues might wake up and read 1 or 2 papers. I got to wake up and read 8. You know, I got to read the wires. I got to leapfrog over the press crew that doesn't look like me and make sure I'm reading The Root, make sure I'm reading Ellie's in the Nation, make sure I'm popping up at the Griot. And so I was fully capable of discussing North Korea. I was in fact well-versed on the latest that was happening, and in fact more so than the person who I was sitting across from, because when I started to detail the challenges around Trump's relationship with Kim Jong-un, the person who I was there to debate was clearly a deer in the headlights and did not know the subject matter as well, and had only been briefed with what sounded like to me GOP talking points that he wasn't prepared to have challenged. And so I just made a decision at that time. It's not worth it. It's not worth going on Fox. This was, you know, years ago, and I was regularly booked on a lot of networks at that point. And so it's not for me, and I just don't support at this point people lending their face to a network that is consistently dishonest, and still, I mean, they get a significant amount of viewers. I mean, they still beat CNN, they still beat MSNBC, they still have significant advertising dollars. And so, you know, I don't feel like I am serving any purpose by lending my likeness to a network that at this point is just pushing propaganda.
Your legitimacy, right? Like the organization, and I don't think that it was always like this. I mean, it's always been conservative, but I don't think it was always like this. I don't think it was always like what Trump has, what it has done in the Trump era. But at this point, you would be lending your legitimacy to an organization that pushes straight up, uncut white supremacy in prime time for ratings and for funsies. And there's just there's no coming back from that. My last bit was Fox hit was with Hannity. I was same situation with the foolery. They came on. I was supposed to talk about Merrick Garland.
Yeah.
And the hold up for that, and we ended up talking about Obama economic policy. It was just like, and afterwards, my uncle was basically just like, my uncle's a philosophy professor at UNC, and he was just like, you're beyond them now. You're beyond them now. You should start acting like it. And I was like, you know what? You're right. So,
and we get to those all the time on other outlets anyway, which is great.
So for those who ask, that is why I think people of integrity try to avoid doing Fox, especially in its current state. Okay, so next question. You talk a lot in your book about the election, how elections are covered, not just this one, but historically going backwards quite a bit. You make, I believe, a fairly compelling case that, although I don't know that you always say this directly, so this is my question. Do you think that the networks, the major news networks, want Trump to win? Not the hosts. We know that. We know you make the argument. It's not the hosts. The hosts are not the ones in charge of it. But do you think that the people upstairs? You make the argument in your book about how flagging all of these networks were, as you say, as their viewership gets older and older, and the young people cut the cords. Their ratings are flagging. Trump comes, boom! It's like a hit of nitrous oxide to their ratings. And now we have another election to cover. Do you think that they want him to win?
So I can't say this go round if the cable news execs want him to win, because these are wealthy people, for the most part, wealthy white folks. And there are so many other areas of their lives that have been impacted in the past 4 years. With the handling of COVID-19, they're stuck in the house with their families like everybody else, with and the fallout that COVID-19 has had on, every area of having their kids at home and having, to be a school teacher and go to work, etc. So I think because of the way that everybody has been impacted by this, I'm just not sure that they want Trump to win. But even beyond that, Elie, I would say there's a story to be told if Trump loses this election. And that's really what the cable news executives need to be focused on, I say. We cannot believe that because Trump is now somehow out of office, that great, everything can just return back to normal. The undoing of what this man has brought down upon the United States is a story. We still, if they are thriving in chaos, we are a long way from getting out of chaos. We still have a global pandemic. We still have several pressing foreign policy challenges that have gotten totally discarded and ignored. We have the undoing of the DOJ. What does rebuilding that look like, particularly in this moment of a racial reckoning and unforgiving criminal justice system that still disproportionately impacts Black people in an adverse way? The healthcare, what's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act. So I think, where before, trying to cover Trump was like trying to catch confetti. Every day it was something ridiculous and people were chasing tweets and just focused on the wrong thing. And so I think this go round, just for the sake of our American electorate, we cannot keep dumbing down the voting population by spoon feeding them chocolate cake every day and turning cable news sets into reality TV shows. Like that model is long gone. And I think if we talk to people, when I host on MSNBC and I've got Adam Schiff on, I'm trying to have a conversation with him that's palatable to everybody. And so when I'm asking him about, well, what's the Gang of Eight gonna do about this latest, intel information that we have, I want to explain to the audience who is the Gang of Eight and why that matters. If I'm talking to former Attorney General Loretta Lynch about criminal justice, I want to explain to people the policy around that you may not know. You may not know what that means. If I'm talking to a representative of the Trump administration even, I want to explain the difference between the executive branch and their role versus the legislative branch. And I think that's a different kind of way of presenting the news that any show I ever anchor will operate that way.
Last question before I open up to questions. And if you guys have questions, please put them into the Q&A chat here in your Zoom. Last question before I at least look at and see if we have any. I believe that your book contains the best analysis of the Kamala Harris presidential run that I've seen. I think you hit it right on the head. But for the listeners, for the people, before they kind of get to it, do you think that the coverage of her campaign was fair? Yes, I am trying to get you in trouble.
Yes, I'm aware. I would say read the book for that answer, because I go through several examples and I think I leave the conclusion there. And I include myself in that. I revisited some of the coverage I did on her campaign. So I'll just talk about what I say about me, and people can read the book and decide for themselves. But in my assessment and analysis of Senator Harris's campaign, looking back, I thought there were times that I treated her like everybody else. I treated her the same way I treated Pete Buttigieg, which on one hand, some people can say, well, yeah, that's journalism, that's how it should be. On the other hand, I have to consider, but what Pete did to run a presidential campaign versus what Senator Harris did to run a presidential campaign, there was a huge difference there. And I think there were times that I wish I had at least highlighted that difference more directly than what I did. And so, look, I think the Harris campaign made a lot of mistakes. I detail them, my opinion, in the book, but I also think they learned some tough lessons. And they, were previously, I think they had a white person running all their press and, didn't really connect as well with Black media. And I think we have seen that change. Her first few interviews after being named vice president was with the Griot. She talked with the Root. She talked with Essence. She talked with all these people that have readership. We read things too, that speak to our issues. And I think that said something about the kind of campaign she's running. And she's got great people. Karine Jean-Pierre is her chief. You and I, she's a colleague and a friend of ours. And so I've seen a stark difference in how she's running as Biden's running mate versus how she ran as an individual candidate. And, I say in the book that I was always a fan of hers, but that didn't mean that I could not look at her through a critical lens. I just wanted to make sure that I was doing it fairly. And in my own self-assessment, I felt like there were times that perhaps, it's hard when you've got 60 seconds in a cable news setting to make a sound bite, which is not how I like to operate. And so I think there were times in that 60 seconds where I was trying to point out areas where they could grow. There was not always time to point out, to counter some of the narratives that were out there about her, which as a journalist, you always at least want to be informing people, even if you're the kind of journalist who gives your opinion.
I like your theory of answering that question with self-assessment, and I will meet you on that tip. I was one of those people who was not, I don't think, particularly critical, but certainly deeply concerned about some of the criminal justice issues with her record. And I think what I learned, and maybe I learned a bit slow, maybe I should have been a little bit faster, was just how many bad faith people there were who are going to use that concern, who aren't actually interested in criminal justice reform, don't actually know what that means, have no idea what that would actually look like. How many people would use that concern, that my kind of good faith concern, as a very, I thought, unfair way and an uninformed way of attacking her more broadly, and to really weave this into some kind of anti-Black issue, which I didn't see coming at all, right? That wasn't, that I did not anticipate that happening to her on this particular issue, and maybe I should. Maybe I just should have been, like, because I don't live under a rock. Like, you know, I understand what Twitter is and how it does its thing. I could have been a little bit quicker on the uptake with that, so I love the self-assessment. All right, question time. Where do we go from here? How do we allow, how do we get our Black voices to become amplified? I like this question because it is forward-looking. I mean, your book details a lot about, you know, it's 3 parts. It's, you know, how you got here, how we got here, and where we're going. Let's really talk about that, where we're going. What do we need to do to make sure that the media so white isn't the world that we're living in?
Well, we have to take up space, and I'll say, you know, a lot of people, you know, ask, what can we do? And the biggest thing you can do is realize that you are the power broker. You hold the most important tool in your hand most days, and that's this right here. That is a television remote. And so when you have networks put someone Black in prime time, like we just saw with Joy Reid, tune into the readout every night, watch it, because when she finally took up space in prime time, a place where she belonged, how did she repay the network? With 2.6 million viewers. And this wasn't a one-off. This wasn't a, oh, wow, everybody tuned in for the premiere. These have been consistent numbers of people tuning in to watch Joy Reid on the readout every night. And so that helps. Even posting, you know, about people who you appreciate them having a space at the helm. So that's first. That's something small that people can do if they're not already doing it. Another thing, I think the executives, something I champion, these news outlets have got to start paying interns. There are not a lot of Black and brown people who can afford to go to these major cities and work for these news outlets and get a place to live, be able to eat, show up to work dressed professionally. You know, these are billion-dollar companies, many of them. And so it's like, pay your interns, find money to pay these interns. The whole adage that, you know, well, we don't know where to find people, that's bullshit. You know, you can find people of color everywhere taking up space at PWI, certainly at HBCUs, and MSIs, minority serving institutions. And so, and at Black outlets. I mean, Michael Harriot is one of the most brilliant writers that I've ever read, next to Elie Mystal, of course.
No, even my wife gives it up to Michael Harriot. I mean, that we do. Like,
he's the best. I mean, this is somebody who can write comically, who can also write very critically, and you know, he can do something on aunties, but he also studied, you know, microeconomics and can have this like incredibly brilliant think piece on the economy. I mean, so if somebody's out there looking for a writer and you say you don't know where to find people, that just seems disingenuous. And just demand that we take up space. And so, you know, when we are denied, I think we have to make our voices heard, that we make up the economic base. We are the blood that keeps them functioning. These eyes, everybody's trying to get them to pay attention to their screen. You've got streaming services, you got cable news outlets, you got Hulu, you got Netflix, you got HBO Max, everything's vying for your attention now. And it's like, hey, if you don't want my attention, there are a whole lot of other outlets there that do. And even in the book, I write about how people tune in when they see themselves reflected, when they see someone who looks like them, and not just who looks like them, but understands them. And so, you know, that's what I, as an individual, am trying to do. When I am on a news set, I want other people to feel like they're there with me. They're there as well. and supporting my colleagues like you, Elie. I mean, when you write something great, I tweet it, I share it, I put it on my Instagram, and I pull pieces from it so people can see. I try to give people a taste. Like, here's a preview of what's in this. Like, I will pull my favorite line out of something. And the piece that you just did on the horrific murder of the 2 law enforcement officers in Los Angeles, and how you talk about how the media covers that. It was such a great piece. And so I hope folks will go out and find that on The Nation as well, because the point that you made, you ever read stuff and you're like, I mean, I had this thought, I just didn't have time to sit down and write it brilliantly and beautifully. But I wish I did, because I want to take credit for this beautiful work. That's how I feel every time I read your stuff.
Thank you. That's very nice, and I appreciate that. I want to collapse to a couple of questions into one, because I'm getting a lot of, when's your next book and when are you going to be on a streaming platform? But I want to tie that back into the book, because you talk a lot about trying to start your own independent news organization with the Beat DC, and you do a critical job of talking about the lack of funding. So talk a little bit more about this, because I don't think that everybody understands that there are lots of Black people in the media and in any industry out here interested in starting their own business and having good ideas and the work ethic and the intelligence, but they don't have the venture capital money, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't know the rich white guy who's supposed to like be the dream maker.
Right.
So talk a little bit about your experiences with the Beat and the inability to get the capital.
So if we think that cable news is mostly white, I am here to tell you that the venture capital space is, you feel like a chocolate chip and milk. I mean, there are very few faces of color to greet you when you go into these funds and you're asking, for me, a lot of money. I was asking, I think at one time, for a round of funding of $2 million. Which didn't mean that one outlet had to give me $2 million. One could say, all right, well, we'll give you $500K. And then you could have another venture come and say, all right, well, we'll give you $700K. You build that way. I thought that was asking for a lot of money until I saw the kind of money that other people were asking for. My little $2 million was nada. Any one of these points, the outlets could have said, yeah, here's your $2 million. Like, whatever, go. We'll see you talk to us in a year when you start making
I thought this was a meeting.
Exactly. And so just the opposition I got. I built a platform that had grown just as quickly as The Skim, which a lot of people read. I built a platform that focused on politics and policy and people of color. And you had guys like, Mike Allen and Jim Vanders with Axios, and they were getting money out the yin yang, and all they had was a concept. Axios wasn't even functioning then. They left Politico and went and founded Axios, and people were saying, well, wait, we don't know what you're going to do, but we want to get in on it. So here's some money. I actually was beyond a concept. I had a successful product that was growing, and people looked at me and just did not think that it was something worth funding, despite the fact that we got almost 100,000 unique daily readers every day with very little advertising. I mean, it was mostly organic word of mouth. So I bankrupted myself several times to keep this operation going. And I spent over $10,000 one month of my own money, just pulling from my savings to keep us afloat. And so it was a very difficult decision to make, to shut it down. But I literally just could not afford it anymore. And my funders, the few that I had, could not, make up the difference in what I needed. So it taught me a lot, but it just also showed the areas where we still have just the field is so not level on in any genre. We just, every day, you can be in a state of rage when you think about the ways that we are denied all the time. And even when you take up space in some of these, cable news sets, and people look at you like, what are you doing here? Like, how did you get here? We didn't invite you. Nobody, crowned you worthy of being here. But nobody ever looks at these basic, average ass, below basic people taking up space who happen to be white and say, how did you get here? Actually, Because I feel like how I got here is a hell of a lot more steep climb than how you got here. And you talk to people and it's like, oh, I got to go to New York. And it's like, oh, where do you stay? Oh, my parents keep a place by the park. I'm staying there. I'm like, I'm fucking counting pennies at the grocery store sometimes. And I'm barely making it. And I still show up here. And I'm smarter than you on this set. And you're telling me about your breezy ride and your nice little parents' condo by the park. You know, it's a world I don't understand, but it's enough to really, you know, send you in a
even
think about
even to get in front of the camera. I mean, people don't, I don't think, always understand just the credentialization that has to happen for Black and brown voices, either through literal like credentials, you have letters behind your name, or the amount of kind of experience and knowledge base and whatever that you can speak to at the drop of a hat, just to put yourself in a position where you are on screen, versus what's expected, frankly, of your white colleagues sometimes and friends sometimes and counterparts other times. And you know, it's not. I've been talking about law with people who don't have college degrees.
Exactly.
Right? Which is,
who have a whole show? Who have a whole opportunity?
like, all right, okay. Guess that'll be fun. Like,
and you're talking about it for free. You're talking about it without getting paid to talk about it. And that's something people don't know, that not everybody is a contributor. And so why is that? Because when you look in these talent departments, there are many talent departments where I've been in where there's not a single person of color in the talent department. The talent department is looking at guests to decide who they like. And so if our little, you know, insular group of Black and brown faces are always like, oh my God, Elie's dope. Did you just hear what Elie said on TV? Can the people in the talent department appreciate that? You know, because it's ridiculous that you're not getting paid for the brilliance you bring. All your segments go fire, you know, they all go viral. You always lose your temper about something at some point. People love to see it. And yet you have people, basic average people who aren't really saying a whole lot. You have people who don't look like us talking about the trends of Black voters. I'm like, really? Tell me some more about how Black people vote from outside the community. Tell me some more about the trends of Black voters. Please talk more about that without anybody who looks like me on set. It's infuriating.
It even goes to the language you're allowed to use. You know, one segment, I said somebody was exhibiting some coonery, which is, you know, a word that is used in our community.
Yeah.
And offset, there, you know, everybody on Twitter was like, oh, that was pretty funny, like, whatever. Offset, there were white people just like, I just can't believe you called that man a house Negro. And I'm like, well, what? Let me Google this for you so you can. I want to close up here a little bit with, because you brought it up now, a little bit talking about your personal story, because I know there are young people who want to get involved in media, who want to either write or produce, be in front of the camera or behind the camera. Tiffany, how early did you have to get up to work, go to work? You know, like I wanted you to tell a little bit of that story.
So when I was with CNN, I could not afford, like my colleagues, to live on Capitol Hill and cute little condos and studios or whatever. I was living in Silver Spring in a studio apartment, and we had to be at work at 6 a.m. on Sundays, and the public transportation system didn't start running until 6, and so that meant I had to take a cab, which was $17.80 at the time, which was a big chunk of money to me. There was no Uber, you know, you had to call and get this cab. And so that was almost $80 a month for me, which was a huge, I mean, this is something I had to budget for. And I had to do it without complaining. And I had to figure out a way to make it happen. And I was going to be there late every night. You know, I would work on a show called Capital Gang, where I'd have to be in the office at 8 a.m. on Saturday, and I would work until 9 p.m. that Saturday to get back up at 5 or 4 a.m. To make it to work by 6 a.m. And so, you know, life didn't change for me after that. Even when I was founding The Beat, I would have to get up at 4 a.m. and I would work until midnight every day. And so, you know, I really do. I try to tell people, hey, I am the working class. Don't talk to me like I'm on set getting that big TV money. The devil is a lie. Where is the big TV money? I haven't seen it yet. I haven't even gotten a thank you, you know, any kind of validation for what I mean. Yeah, money. I ain't even gotten that TV thank you. And so, you know, I just the hard work is unavoidable. And so the thing I would say though to young people who want to do this is to realize that appearing on TV talking about politics is not a job. That is something that you do in addition to whatever your area of expertise is. Because when I talk to young people and they're like, I want to be a political commentator, I'm like, yeah, that's not a career. Like, what is it that you actually want to do? And why does anybody care about your opinion at this point? You're 22. Like, what are you going to get on TV and talk about? And so I would encourage young people to actually focus on something they have a passion about and become subject matter expertise or develop a subject matter expertise. And then for people who want to get into actual journalism, this is another challenge. I talk to a lot of young people who say, I want to be a journalist. And I ask them, well, what papers do you read every day? Who are some of your favorite writers? Like, talk to me about your bylines. Like, who are you looking for to see what they've written? And they can't answer. And that's devastating to me.
Who are you stealing from?
Or how do you want to work in news and you don't consume news? Because telling me you watch MSNBC 3 hours a day does not a journalist make. And so if you aren't up reading the Times, the Post, the LA Times, the Economist, the Atlantic, the Nation, if you can't talk to me about think pieces, if you can't talk to me about your favorite writers, it's hard to take you seriously as somebody who really wants to be a journalist. Or I ask people, all right, you're a journalist. You're in charge of putting the news show together. What are your top 3 stories today? And what are you leading with? This is a question you should be able to answer. Even if the answers are wrong, you ought to have something. But if you're like, oh, I mean, I know the president met with like somebody from the Middle East today. I'm like, yeah, no, this is not. So that's the advice I would give people. Like, be prepared for the hard work. Don't expect sympathy or empathy from your colleagues or your superiors. But most importantly, be the best at what you do. Anticipate what you're going to be asked about and know it and read it and consume it. There's nothing easy about it. There is no easy path. And don't expect a pat on the back because you worked an 18-hour day. I mean, that can be par for the course at a certain time. Now, look, I'm in my 40s now, and I think I deserve the right to complain about working so long and so hard. I want to sit back a little bit and chill. I'm technically supposed to be on bed rest right now, but I couldn't pass up this opportunity.
Look, I tell people all the time, I make less money at 42 than I did at 27. Now, granted, I was a Wall Street lawyer at 27. I'm making a lot of money, so that's not it's not exactly an apples to apples. But it does. I use that to show, like, you know, journalism is not where the money is made. Right. What I did do while I was 27, making all that money, was starting to develop those expertise that now I am paid to talk about. And so your point about actually, you know, especially if you want to be a commentator, like you and I are commentators. If you want to be a pundit, then you best be an expert in something. Because if you're not an expert in something, there's no actual reason why people should listen to you. And I know, like, again, if you watch certain networks, you might get the impression that you can just be any old, you know, randomly white supremacist man, and then they give you TV shows, and that might be true if you want it, but at least that. But even those guys are experts in white supremacy, right? Tucker Carlson isn't at the white supremacy training table, right? You know, he's so whatever you do. You need to be an expert in order to talk about it, and that is true throughout all of media, even if you see people who you think are objectively not particularly knowledgeable of what they're doing. It's been an hour. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us for this hour in the midst of such truly terrible news. I gotta go work. Like, I'm gonna be up all night trying to do this. It's a really sad day. But I think I'm glad, Tiffany, that you were able to still do this, because I think your book is very important. And I think that when people read your book, they will understand why the news looks the way it does. And that is a crucial aspect towards the media literacy that we all should be trying to bring to the table every day. So thank you so much for your work, Tiffany. Thank you so much for your book.
Thank you, Elie. This has been great. And thank you, Powell's Books, for hosting us for this event. This has been such a wonderful conversation on what's been a grossly depressing night. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany and Elie, for joining us tonight for this conversation. The new book is Say It Louder, Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy. You can buy a copy at powells.com. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Bye, guys.